May 24th, 1941, North Atlantic. Aboard HMS Sheffield, cold spray hissing across the steel deck, the wind rolling in low gray sheets across the cruiser's bow. The sea is restless, heavy with the kind of silence that comes only before something catastrophic. Inside the dim operations room, red lights cast long shadows across the consoles. The hum of machinery vibrates like a living pulse through the hull. Leading Telegraphist Harold Bates leans over the Type 279 early warning radar set, headphones pressed tight against his ears. The air smells faintly of warm circuitry and damp wool, the unmistakable perfume of a ship that has been chasing ghosts for days. You can almost hear the tension living in the spaces between breaths. The Bismarck, Hitler's floating fortress, has vanished into the gray wilderness of the Atlantic. The Royal Navy's best battleships are running blind. Every man aboard Sheffield knows that if the German giant slips away, convoys will burn and Britain may starve. Bates stares at the oscillating green beam sweeping across the screen. A flicker. Barely a whisper, a thin blade of static rising from the baseline, too faint to be a ship, too stubborn to be dismissed. Grass, someone mutters behind him. Sea clutter, ignore it. But Bates doesn't. He feels the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Instinct, experience, a hunch sharpened by the desperation of the hunt. He adjusts the gain knob, easing it with the delicacy of a surgeon. The whisper becomes a pulse. The beam swings again. Another pulse. This time stronger. "Lieutenant Commander?" Bates calls out, voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. "You'll want to see this." The officer steps forward, eyes narrowing at the screen. On the Type 279, contacts never look dramatic, just bumps and ghosts, shapes emerging from noise. But these bumps are spaced, rhythmic, consistent. Not weather, not birds. Something big, moving. Outside, Sheffield's lookouts see nothing except endless waves and low cloud. But inside this red-lit room, Bates feels reality shifting. Because radar doesn't lie, not when the echoes keep returning like distant footsteps. Another sweep, the pulse sharpens. A second operator moves in, making calculations on a grease pencil plotting board. Range, roughly 200 miles. Heading, closing. A murmur ripples through the room. 200 miles. That's impossible. The Germans can't be that close. The Bismarck shouldn't be anywhere near Sheffield's patrol line. But the trace is growing. Fat, heavy, unmistakably metallic. Bates swallows hard. His voice comes out low. "That's no merchantman." A tense silence follows. Every man feels it. This is the moment the entire Battle of the Atlantic hangs on. If they're wrong, they'll waste critical time. If they're right, they are staring at the ghost of the Bismarck, coming back to life. The officer hesitates only a moment before barking orders. "Signal Admiral Tovey, possible large contact bearing. Plot Swordfish launch range. Keep tracking." The room brightens with urgency as ratings scribble, transmit, and relay. The Sheffield seems to pulse with new energy, like a predator reawakening. Bates keeps his eyes locked on the screen. The faint smudge is now a clear echo, marching across the beam with deliberate mass. A battleship's heartbeat. He hears the distant rumble of engines deep below, as Sheffield swings onto a new heading to shadow the contact. The deck shivers beneath his boots. Every man aboard knows what this means. Far to the southwest, the carrier HMS Royal receives the message. Swordfish crews scramble, pulling on flying gear, loading torpedoes, engines coughing to life. Admiral Tovey now has a vector, and the vector came from a radar operator who refused to blink. Back aboard Sheffield, Bates watches the echo swell across the screen, steady, relentless.
The Bismarck is no longer lost, and because of this faint flicker in a dim radar room, the Royal Navy now has its first real chance to stop Germany's most terrifying warship before it reaches the safety of occupied France. The hunt is no longer blind. It has begun again, with a whisper. May 24, 1941, North Atlantic. The daylight has thinned into a bruised metallic dusk as HMS Sheffield cuts through the rolling swell, her bow rising and falling like a heartbeat in the gray void. The radar contact grows more certain with each sweep. Inside the operations room, the tension has thickened to something almost physical. Men speak in clipped tones, papers shuffle, pencils scrape. Every movement feels urgent yet controlled, as if one wrong twitch could snap the fragile thread connecting them to the faint echo on the screen. Harold Bates keeps one hand on the gain control, gently tuning the world of static and storm into clarity. His eyes burn from staring too long, but he won't look away. Not now. Not when Britain's fate seems to tremble in the green glow of this oscilloscope. The officer beside him mutters, "If that's the Bismarck, she's running for France. Saint-Nazaire or Brest. We let her cross that line, we'll never catch her." And they all know it. Outside, the cold wind lashes Sheffield's superstructure. Lookouts huddle behind shields, sweeping the horizon with binoculars, but the ocean remains empty. The Bismarck is still hidden by distance and murk. Only the radar sees her. Only Bates hears her distant electronic heartbeat. A runner bursts into the compartment. Message from Ark Royal acknowledged. Swordfish squadron warming up. Admiral Tovey requests continuous range and bearing updates. No gaps. No gaps. A simple order, nearly impossible to obey in a storm-torn ocean with primitive radar and a ship dancing on swells like a cork. But Bates nods. Aye. He steadies the signal once more. Above deck, Sheffield's engines thrum with a deep, predatory steadiness. Commander M.J. Manserg stands near the bridge wing, his greatcoat flapping in the wind, eyes locked on the direction of the contact. His officers move around him with quiet precision, but even they can't mask the nervous energy radiating from the men. Somewhere out there, beyond the gray curtain, a monster is moving. The battleship Bismarck, armed with 8 15-inch guns, thick armor, and the pride of the Kriegsmarine, is steaming towards safety. But tonight she is blind to the small cruiser tailing her from hundreds of miles away. Sheffield to Ark Royal, the wireless operator intones. We have a solid contact. Bearing confirmed. Repeat, bearing confirmed. The bridge officer grimaces. Let's hope those Swordfish boys can see better than we can. Back in the radar room, Bates hears a subtle change in the echo. A widening, a sharpening. He leans forward. She's turning. No, she's adjusting course, just a few degrees. Confirm. Bates watches the next sweep. The contact shifts again, small but undeniable. Confirmed. New heading, southern drift, slight port correction. The officer grabs a chart. She's maneuvering. That means her crew is nervous. She knows she's being hunted. Another runner arrives, panting. Second Swordfish wave preparing for takeoff. First wave is launching now. They need precise intercept coordinates or they'll be flying blind. Bates adjusts the range gate and provides them.
The room reacts like a single organism. Men writing, shouting, relaying, transmitting. Every detail matters. The Swordfish biplanes have no radar, no night optics. They fly low, slow, and vulnerable. If Bates's readings are off by even a mile, they could miss the Bismarck entirely, or run straight into her anti-aircraft fire. And so Bates continues, steady as a metronome, reading the ocean through invisible echoes. Hours pass. The storm thickens. Rain hammers the deck. Lightning flickers at the horizon like distant artillery. Sheffield's crew braces themselves as the ship pitches hard. The radar screen shivers with static. Heavy spikes of interference bloom like weeds. "Damn," an operator curses. Bates tightens his jaw. "Hold her steady. Come on." He rides the interference like a ship rides a wave, adjusting, recalibrating, coaxing the faint trace back into view. Slowly, agonizingly, it returns. Contact restored. A cheer breaks the tension, brief and raw. Then the bridge calls down. Swordfish have reached the estimated intercept zone. The radar officer cups his hands around his mouth. Any sign of them? Before anyone can answer, the radio crackles to life. The operator lifts his headset. "It's Ark Royal. Stand by." Swordfish sighting smoke on the horizon. Possible contact. The room freezes. Bates feels his throat tighten. He tunes the radar once more. The trace leaps. Bolder. Clearer. Closer. There she is. Germany's greatest warship, emerging from the shroud of static and cloud, exactly where Bates predicted she'd be. He whispers, "We've found her." A voice from the wireless erupts. Torpedo attack commencing. Far across the stormy sea, the Swordfish biplanes dive toward the colossal shape of the Bismarck, their engines buzzing like angry insects against the thunderous artillery blasts erupting from the German giant. They launch torpedoes. One hits. The rudder shatters. The Bismarck begins to turn and cannot stop. She steams in helpless circles as the cold Atlantic closes in. And aboard the Sheffield, Harold Bates watches the echo loop and loop on the screen like a dying heartbeat. May 24th, 1941. Night in the North Atlantic. The sky is a black iron dome, hammered by wind and rain. Thunder rolls across the waves like the echo of distant naval guns. HMS Sheffield plows through the darkness, her bow cleaving aside mountains of cold water. Spray lashes the bridge windows as officers peer into the void, searching for any sign, smoke, flame, silhouette of the stricken Titan now spiraling helplessly in the storm. Below deck, the radar room glows like a small red sanctuary amid the chaos. Harold Bates keeps both hands braced against the console as the ship shudders beneath him. The echo on the scope loops again, an unmistakable arc. The Bismarck is circling. She is wounded. She is trapped. Bates doesn't smile. No one does. The room is too heavy with the weight of what comes next. The wireless operator stiffens. Incoming priority from Admiralty. King George V and Rodney closing in. Expected firing range by dawn.
Dawn. The word hits the room like a spark. It means the chase is ending tonight, or tomorrow morning at the latest. But night also means the Bismarck still has one weapon left: darkness. Her radar operators could detect Sheffield if she gets too close. A single salvo from Bismarck's 15-inch guns could obliterate the cruiser. Bates knows this. Everyone knows it. The officer on duty leans over the radar table. Maintain shadowing distance. Do not, under any circumstances, close visual range. A tense quiet settles. Outside, the storm screams against the hull. Sheffield rolls so violently that mugs slide off tables and shatter on the deck. Men cling to rails, boots slipping on the wet steel. Still, the radar room holds steady. The screen flickers with interference, but Bates nurses the signal like a fragile flame. The echo pulses. Broad, bold. The signature of a giant dying in circles. On the bridge, Mansurg grips the rail as wind slams into the superstructure. Lightning flashes, brief glimpses of towering walls of water surging beside the ship. He speaks to no one in particular, voice pitched low. She's hurt. They'll fight like cornered wolves. Sheffield's crew goes silent. Somewhere below, the damage control teams brace for action that may never come, but everyone knows the Bismarck's guns can reach them even in this darkness. The sea is a battlefield of senses. No one can see the enemy, but they can feel her out there, turning, trying, failing, waiting for the dawn that will bring her executioners. Back in the radar room, Bates watches the signal waver. A surge of static, thick as fog, rolls across the scope. He adjusts. Nothing. Adjusts again. A faint trace, weak, blurred. One of the junior operators glances at Bates, in fear in his eyes. Is she gone? No, he murmurs. The storm's masking her. Give it a moment. The lightning outside crackles again, rattling the equipment. A fuse hisses, a lamp flickers. For a heartbeat, the radar screen goes dark. Bates's blood runs cold. Then the power stabilizes, the green line sweeps, and the echo reappears brighter than ever. There, he breathes. She's right where we left her. The room exhales in unison. The officer checks his watch. King George V and Rodney will have her at first light. The men hold that thought close. It means survival. It means revenge for Hood. It means the end of a threat that has haunted the Atlantic for months. Hours drag by. The storm begins to ease. The wind lowers from a scream to a moan. The clouds thin, turning the night from pitch black to charcoal gray. Bates stares at the fading static on his scope. The Bismarck rolls slowly in the waves, engines still running, helm jammed 15 degrees to port, eternally turning. The circles grow tighter, like the tightening of a noose. The officer speaks softly, almost reverently. She is finished. A runner arrives from the bridge. Message: visual contact expected at first light. Sheffield to withdraw to safe distance. Mansurg won't risk his cruiser when the battleships open fire. Bates hears every footstep, every muttered order, every tension-laced breath as the ship turns away from the doomed behemoth. The echo weakens on the radar, shrinking as Sheffield increases distance. He steps back from the console for the first time in hours, rubbing his eyes. The officer pats him on the shoulder. "Good work, Bates. You did your part." Bates doesn't answer. He simply watches the echo fade, a giant slipping into shadow. He knows that when it reappears, it will be under the guns of Britain's mightiest warships. And when that happens, the North Atlantic will shake. May 25th, 1941, North Atlantic, 05:52 hours. First light bleeds into the storm-washed horizon, a thin silver line stretching across a heaving, steel-gray sea. HMS Sheffield holds position several miles north of the crippled Bismarck. Her crew crowds silently at the rails, steam rising from their breath in the frigid morning air. The storm has loosened its grip, leaving behind a restless swell, shards of mist, and a sky bruised from the night's violence. No one speaks. They simply watch the horizon where the monster waits. On the bridge, Commander Mansurg lowers his binoculars. "Signal from King George V. They have radar contact. Rodney as well." He turns to his officers. "Stand clear. This is their fight now." Below deck, Harold Bates steps out of the radar room for the first time since the previous night. His eyes sting from exhaustion, but he forces himself toward the open air,
gripping the bulkhead as Sheffield rolls beneath him. He wants to see the dawn, to see the final chapter of the hunt he helped shape. As he steps onto the deck, cold wind slaps his face, sharp and metallic. The smell of salt and diesel hangs heavy, mixed with an undercurrent of something darker, anticipation. He looks south. There, barely visible through the pale fog, is the vast, unmistakable silhouette of the Bismarck. Even damaged, she is colossal. Her superstructure rises like a black cliff from the ocean. Smoke drifts upward from her stacks. She lists slightly. Her stern drags sluggishly with each swell. Rudder jammed, engines fighting uselessly against the tight arc she is trapped in. She is wounded, but she is not meek. Every man aboard Sheffield knows a cornered beast is still a beast. The crack of the first British salvo tears across the sea like thunder splitting the world in half. King George V and Rodney have opened fire. Flashes erupt from their gun turrets, bright, violent bursts against the grey morning. Moments later, the sky howls as 14-inch and 16-inch shells scream overhead, tearing through clouds, slamming toward the German giant. Bates grips the railing as the deck shudders under the distant concussion. Men around him mutter prayers, curses, whispered fragments of awe. Rodney fires again, a full broadside. The shockwave ripples across the sea. Far ahead, towering geysers of water erupt around Bismarck's hull. Some miss, some strike. One hits the forward superstructure in a blinding flash. Another crashes into the hull just below her main deck. The German ship returns fire, huge orange blossoms flaring from her forward turrets, sending her own deadly shells roaring across the water. The concussion of her guns hits Sheffield seconds later, a low, gut-deep thump that vibrates through the bones. "Still fighting," someone whispers. "Even now." But Bismarck's aim is off. Her helm is broken, her steering gone. Her turrets cannot track properly on a moving, circling target. She fires again, wide.
Hit after hit hammers into her. Columns of flame rise from her midships. One turret jams. Smoke pours out in thick, dark coils. The British battleships close the distance. By 0900, the Bismarck is a burning, shattered husk. Her crew fights desperately, man after man trying to keep guns active, hoses running, compartments sealed, but the damage is catastrophic. Rodney lands another direct hit, blowing apart the bridge. King George V's salvos tear huge chunks of steel from her sides. German sailors abandon the AA guns, some leaping into the freezing water. Others cling to the railings, refusing to surrender, even as firestorms rip their decks apart. Bates watches from far away, heart heavy. He never wanted to admire an enemy ship, but it is impossible not to. The Bismarck is dying with a ferocity that demands respect. A final flash, enormous, blinding, rips through her aft section. Then the firing stops. Not because her enemies choose mercy, but because she has nothing left to fight with. She is silent, broken, finished. Minutes later, HMS Dorsetshire moves in for the final blow. 3 torpedoes leave her tubes, white wakes slicing through the gray water. Bates can see them from Sheffield's deck, streaking toward the listing giant. A heartbeat. Then, a deep, monstrous shudder runs through the sea. Bismarck's hull rolls to port. Her great guns tilt toward the waves. Smoke pours from every wound. Slowly, impossibly, the pride of the Kriegsmarine begins to capsize. Water floods her decks, air rushes out in roaring bursts. Men jump or cling to the tilting steel, shouting for help or for God or for a home they'll never see again. And then, like a mountain sinking beneath the world, Bismarck slips beneath the Atlantic. Stern last, flag still flying. The sea closes over her with a final hiss, leaving only wreckage, oil, and the cries of survivors drifting across the waves. Harold Bates lowers his gaze. He was the first man in the Royal Navy to spot the faint echo that led them here. He found the giant. The fleet destroyed it. But standing in the cold Atlantic wind, watching the last ripples fade, Bates feels no triumph, but only the weight of history unfolding in the gray morning light. May 25th, 1941. Late morning. The North Atlantic lies strangely calm in the aftermath of chaos. Where hours ago the sea thundered with artillery and flame, now only the low rumble of distant engines and the slap of waves against hulls remain. Oil slicks shimmer like bruises across the water. Small clusters of wreckage drift aimlessly, splintered planks, twisted metal, and the unmistakable shapes of life jackets bobbing in the swell. Harold Bates, watching from Sheffield's deck, the noises cut deeper than the thunder of guns ever could.
Moments ago, these men were enemies behind steel and fire. Now they are simply men in the freezing ocean, pleading for life. Bates stands silently, cap tucked under his arm, absorbing the scene with an expression impossible to read. Around him, the crew shares the same heavy quiet. No jeers, no triumph, only the solemn understanding of what has been won and what it has cost. Commander Mansard steps beside him. His voice is low, nearly lost to the wind. "It's over." Bates nods slowly. "Aye, sir." But his eyes remain fixed on the empty patch of sea where the Bismarck slipped beneath the waves. Even now he imagines the giant lying on the ocean floor, twisted and broken, her once proud hull settling into the eternal darkness. He never saw the ship up close. He only knew her as a smear of static, a shifting pulse on the radar screen. Yet he feels her loss, the weight of thousands of lives uprooted in a morning, the weight of what his discovery set in motion. Below deck, the radar room hums quietly, almost peacefully. The operators sit at their consoles, logging the final entries of the operation. The tension that once filled the compartment like electricity has drained away, leaving only exhaustion. A young operator looks up as Bates returns. "Sir, was that really it? She's gone?" Bates gives a single, somber nod. "Aye, they've done it." A hush settles. The men return to their instruments, though the work now feels mechanical, shadows of the frantic urgency that guided their every movement through the long night. Bates rests a hand on the Type 279 console, the same worn metal panel he'd leaned over when he caught the faint echo no one else saw, the same screen he watched hour after hour while the storm tried to drown its signal. He runs a thumb over the edge of the scope, almost gently. That fleeting pulse of green light had changed everything. A hunch, a whisper of static, a moment of instinct that altered the fate of thousands. By afternoon, the British ships pull away from the wreck site. The survivors rescued, the rest claimed by the sea. Dorsetshire signals her departure. Maori follows. King George V and Rodney have already turned north, battered and low on ammunition. Sheffield resumes her patrol track, cutting eastward through the long, rolling swells. The storm clouds begin to break, revealing patches of pale sunlight that glitter on the water like scattered shards of gold. Bates steps out onto the deck one last time. The wind is calmer now, carrying only the smell of salt and smoke fading into distance.
He closes his eyes and listens. No guns, no engines straining for speed, no frantic commands or alarms, just the steady heartbeat of the North Atlantic, eternal, indifferent, wide enough to swallow giants. He breathes deeply, letting the cold air fill his lungs. Mansurd's voice echoes somewhere behind him, faint but warm. "Good work, Bates. You helped end it." Bates opens his eyes, gazing toward the horizon where the Bismarck died. He thinks of the men on both sides, of the lives saved by stopping the great German battleship, of the lives lost in doing so. He doesn't feel like a hero. He feels like a witness, a man who listened to the sea and heard history whisper back. As Sheffield steams onward, leaving only ripples behind, Harold Bates returns quietly to his duties. The war is far from over. Other ships, other battles, other echoes will come. But for now, for this moment, the North Atlantic is calm, and the faint blip that once haunted the radar screen is gone forever.